in thinking through those issues, and the sorts of contributions that we should be focused on are, how do we maintain the legitimacy of our organisation? So what are the conversations going on out there that might threaten our legitimacy? How are we behaving and acting, which means that we ourselves are virtually committing suicide, that take away our license to operate? And it's really interesting because I think that the reputation that you have is an absolute measure of your performance. And I'll say that again. If you think about it, the reputation you have is an absolute measure of your performance. So reputation is what people out there believe you to be. And if it's different from the reputation that you think you should have, then questions at this level need to be undertaken. Okay? So the best example that I know of, and I'm sorry it's a British example, is our National Health Service, as you know, national icon. It has a constitution that is enshrined in law. And I, as a British citizen, can actually take the National Health Service to court if it breaks this constitution. And it's a values-based constitution. So I would ask you, as I asked other people, if you had a constitution enshrined in law and it was public and it was values-based, could you honestly say that you live your values now? It's an enormous challenge. And how would you change that? How would you change your constitution so that you couldn't be challenged in the courts of public opinion? So at the corporate level, then often there's discussions, and we know here financial directors hold sway here, around how the organisation deploys its resources, what's the shape of the organisation. It's internally oriented, and this is a question that we get all the time. What's the return on investment for this public relations activity, this communications activity? It's a stupid question because it's about 81%. That's the return on investment, or minus 81% if you get it wrong. Okay? So we need to think about how we can work with people at this level on making sure that their decisions are informed, because we've got that external perspective, which means that decisions, we can test whether decisions are going to be regarded as legitimate or not, and whether or not that 81% is going to be put at threat. We need to coach management on their communication responsibilities. So we don't have the stupidity of, I'd like my life back when 11 people have died. Yeah? And preserving and building an authentic organisational character. So we need to think about how we articulate the value of communications to the organisation. So this is my little balanced scorecard, if you like, of communications and our ROI. And I would say that if we can articulate our contribution about how we are building the brand and what the value of reputation is, and we can say if you do this, then this is a threat that you do put to our reputation, or this will enhance our reputation. Or if decisions are being made and we know that the relationships are not in place that are going to be able to carry those decisions through, then we can point to the risk that are in that. Or if we know that we have particularly strong relationships and we're not leveraging those relationships in a way that the organisation may be able to, then again it helps shape decision making within the organisation. And I think that this one is the least understood and the most threatening. What is the culture of the organisation? We're now in an environment where lots of mergers and acquisitions are taking place. 80% of acquisitions and mergers fail because of cultural issues. And if we're able to discuss those and prepare the organisation for the weight of cultural change and understand and articulate that, then we're making a big contribution. Because this is one of my favourite pictures. Because if we don't make that contribution properly at the corporate level, we end up putting lipstick in the pig. Okay? And we've all been there, and we've all put lots of lipstick on the pig, but the problem is it's always a pig. The decision is always a bad one. So if we can get in at the decision-making level, we may not have so many problems. Then at the third level, the stakeholder value chain level, this is about our everyday interactions with those stakeholders who are nearest and dearest to us. But I think there's more profound questions for us around who should be in that stakeholder chain. Now we know that these days we can't always choose that, but sometimes we can. And remember that your narrative now is in the hands of other people. So who you choose to work with is part of your narrative. Your authenticity is on the line if you make expedient decisions about a quick fix by linking with a particular organisation. And I'll give you an example here of dangerous liaisons. Illy Cafe, you know, premier coffee maker, now have a cafe in a can. Illesimo. Do you know who makes the cans? Coca-Cola. And that Illy went through absolute agonies about whether or not they should go with Coca-Cola because of all the values that Coca-Cola stands for. And they still reflect on it. And we call it Chatham House rules, where we don't tell stories outside the room. But I know that that was one of the hardest decisions that Illy ever made. Who do we get our cans from? It sounds stupid, but it doesn't, because when people read the can, they see Coca-Cola. And all the values of Coca-Cola are now associated with Illy. So who do you keep company with? I'm not going to spend any time on this, because this is really you doing your job every day, doing campaigns, using strategic programs to help the organisation meet its objectives, and working with others to help them in their communication tasks. So those are the 4 levels. And what I found is, and what we found is that one of the big issues is that people don't have appropriate conversations at appropriate levels. So even senior communication people will go and talk about, I'll do you a campaign on X, when they're talking at that corporate level. Instead of thinking about decisions at corporate level have to be articulated in terms of returns, resources. So when having discussions at that level, I need to talk about the threat to reputation, the advantage to reputation, the quality and value of relationships, the issues of culture. I don't talk about press releases. And this comes to the third area that I was talking about earlier, about enacting the role. And part of that is having the right conversations at the right levels. So we found that this little model, although it's fairly obvious really, has been quite helpful in helping people think through the nature of their work. And when you go back to the office, it's a really interesting exercise to do with your team, to actually get them to think about the discussions that they've had with senior colleagues over the last week. And I'll be prepared to give you at least €2. A lot of money for me, I come from Yorkshire, okay, that most of those conversations have been about this, instead about conversations that are appropriate to the level. Okay, now I said it was a 4x4 model, and I'm not going to talk to you about these other strands, but what we've concluded is that all those levels you have to bear certain things in mind. One is the nature of the brand, leadership, because communication changes things, and therefore how are you leading the organisation as you have these discussions. But communication is a core competence, that we shouldn't keep it all to ourselves, but we should be educating people within our organisation to be communicatively competent and planning. You can have a copy of these slides if you wish afterwards, by the way, if they'd be helpful. Okay, so we can see from what I've just said that really we have a core role in 4 parts. And that at that societal level, we are, if you like, the orienter of the organisation, the person with the compass. Where's true north for this organisation? Are we sticking to our purpose? Are we true to our values? Okay. At the corporate level, we're a navigator. Very complex stakeholder relationships externally, very complex decisions that have to factor in those things that are important to those stakeholders, and making sure that the external voice is factored into decision making, navigating the organisation through very complex waters, but ones where they can actually founder, where the ship can sink, because finance becomes the dominant decision making factor, and it is almost always wrong. Okay, and then we're a catalyst at that stakeholder or value chain level, and I'm going to say a little bit more about this in a minute. But we actually shape things up in that value chain. We actually disturb the equilibrium quite a lot, and then of course we implement programs. I mentioned I was just going to spend a couple more minutes on, so are you getting bored? Is this okay? You happy? Okay, just going to the catalyst a little bit level. This is at this value chain level that I mentioned. So what do we mean about public relations and communications people being a catalyst in the organisation? Well, I think that we are individuals who make things happen in a particular way. We're about defending values and relationships. In the whole of that value chain, where we work closely with those organisations, individuals, and groups that are critically crucial to our organisation, like our customers, like our finances, like our staff, okay? And we are the person who, we are the people who examine all those touch points, and they are increasing, and they are becoming more and more complex and multi-layered, to see whether or not the organisation's values, remember I talked about purpose, whether they are being lived, or whether or not they're being destroyed, because individual interactions destroy the trust equity that an organisation has in an instant. I've got a big nose, okay, it's a trait of my family. But I think we need big noses in public relations and communications, because it's not just about communication. It's about structures and processes and systems. And as one communications director said to me a few weeks ago, my job, Anne, is to fix the reality. That's really interesting. The reality is broken, okay, out there, because we have systems and processes that tell a different story from what I'm trying to say and do as a communications director. So I have to fix that reality so it's in line with the narrative, okay? Or we tell a different narrative. And that is a hard thing for a comms director to do, because often we don't have a functional expertise that's recognised, as is finance or, say, operations. But it's a vital role for us to play. And that means going into other leaders' territory, and they don't like it, folks. They don't like it. Okay? So our job, partly, is to assess the difference between experience and expectation, because it's that normally causes us problems in organisations. So people have an expectation of the organisation, but the experience is different. And that can be from any of those stakeholder perspectives, including strategic partners. Okay, and why is this important? Because now a new business paradigm is emerging, where actually covert governance is becoming more important than overt compliance. So you can we know these organisations who have obeyed all the rules. Barclays, well, actually it's broken a few rules recently. But for many years, and the Cooperative Bank, which is you may not know, the Cooperative Bank was a values-based bank which has just had to go to be bailed out in the UK, based on sort of egalitarian principles, didn't invest at all in armaments, etc., just gone belly up, okay? Because they didn't understand that at the heart of operating now is an expectation which goes beyond compliance. And us being plugged into what those covert governance requirements are is a powerful thing for us to offer to our organisation. And it's a world that CEOs and boards are completely unused to. I'm on the board of an organisation, and one of the things that we do every month is to look through the compliance and risk register. I don't see us looking very often at the reputation and relationship register. But that's worth 81%. So, okay, so the implications for us then is that we are an ideological leader in our organisations. Yes, we are the champion of values and purpose, and we are the nagging conscience, and we are the one who tries to find a place where we can add value in our value chain,